Sound matters. Be heard. Welcome to the podcast where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes tips to make your own show sound truly spectacular. This is Podtastic Audio.
Hey, what's happening? How are you doing today? How's your podcast coming along? Do you even have a podcast? Maybe you're thinking about starting a podcast. We are getting into 2023, right around the corner. I am Chris of the Chris and Christine Show podcast. You can find out all you want to know about that show if you decide to look it up at chrisandchristineshow.com. And yes, there will be a link to that right in the show notes of this episode. Links are amazing. They're super simple because all you got to do is look down in the show notes and look, there's all the links you need. Clickety click, click. And there you go. You get to go wherever you want to go. And that's why links are so important to put those in show notes. So anyways, today I have a fantastic VIP guest to stop by the studio today via CleanFeed, of course, because I love using CleanFeed because it delivers amazing audio very quickly. In fact, they just won an Emmy about it earlier this year. They won an Emmy for their work with film and movie production work using CleanFeed. So you have a podcast, you're thinking, how can I get amazing audio for my podcast? Now I have some recording tips that you can put in place today to make sure your audio sounds spectacular. So one of the very first tips I have is you should probably be podcasting with the right equipment. Now, what does that even mean? Well, let's just say don't use your phone or maybe a Blue Yeti microphone turned in the wrong direction in the middle of a noisy outdoor environment or something like that. Make sure you got the right equipment for the job. Basically what it is. You wouldn't go to a racetrack and race, some piece of crap car that you picked up for $200. These race cars are designed for a particular purpose. So probably get the right gear you need for your podcast. That's all I'm saying. But it doesn't have to be expensive. You can get like a basic microphone as long as you know how to use it correctly. The next thing I say here is record in the right environment. Well, obviously not a noisy room. Make sure it's all clean, like a clean room. And then also if it's possible, I know this room doesn't have a lot of sound sucking up material really. It's got it's probably like the worst place to record a podcast because it has solid walls and solid tile floors. But there is some stuff in this room. Like there's a coat rack with some clothing hanging on it. There is a couch / futon behind me. And there's things in this room to help soak up some of the audio. So that really does help out quite a bit. Spend some time warming up your voice. I do multiple takes before I get going. It's always like take 1, take 2, take 3, I just run. And then eventually I'm like, okay, I think this is the one we're going to go with. And I just roll right through it. So take some time warming up. Now, if you're doing a group session, one tip they say is you can probably mute out the people that are not talking, like mute their microphones, just so it doesn't pick up any extra background noise. I know it's kind of difficult to do when you're in the heat of the moment, and you're talking, you're discussing, you're like in the whole conversation. It's hard to really like juggle buttons while you're talking or other people are talking. So that's one tip you can use to do this. Let's see here. It says, eliminate background noise as much as possible. That's a given. If you have, say, a TV on in the room, then you could turn that off. If you have a dog barking or kids running around in the same room, don't podcast when you got all this extra noise. But you can take care of some of it in post-production, but not all of it. Post-production, audio plugins and things like that, they work pretty well. But I would say try to get the best sound possible from the start. Another tip, it says, resolve your audio issues early. The earlier you can nip this stuff in the bud, the better. Always try to come in with the best sound possible. It makes editing so much easier. Let me tell you, it's like a breeze if everything sounds good from the start. Let's see what other tips they have. It just mentions that to record each person a separate track. I've been saying this for years. If you can get every person on your podcast on their own individual audio track, if somebody had a problem with their microphone or they bumped it or something, or maybe they coughed, who knows what, you can easily take that out and it does not interrupt anything else. And also, too, you can silence the audio if they're not talking, but they got a buzz from their microphone or something, issues with their microphone. You can silence out that part where they're not talking, and it won't affect the conversation at all. I know some people like to just dump everything into one audio file. In fact, I'm guilty of that myself. I've done that in the early stages, only because I didn't know any better. I didn't know how to do this stuff. I didn't know what separate audio tracks even meant. I thought separate audio tracks was only for like musicians when they want to record a band. What they'll do is they'll have the drums on one track, the guitar on another track, vocals on another track. And then that way, if they want to go back and edit something or do a retake, they don't have to have the whole band together. Hey, Johnny on drums, get back over there. We got to do this all over again. No, they just record the guitar part all over again, or maybe do that separately when they want to do it. That's how they do it when they record a band. You should watch your levels while you record. I try to do that on the Rodecaster. There is a peak meter on the Rodecaster. It goes up and down. Almost every audio recording software out there, I think there's some kind of levels. So kind of keep your levels low enough. Well, actually, you can get them high enough to where you can understand them and hear them, but you still want them low enough just in case you have a little headroom. So when you get excited or something happens where you do go up in volume a little bit, it doesn't go quite into the red section and peak. You kind of want to get yourself a little headroom. And trust me, you always can boost it later in post-production. That's what I usually do. Works out fantastic. And the last thing I'm going to mention is it says here, trust your ears and your instincts. Basically, if you hear something that doesn't sound right, you should probably figure out a way to fix it and get it going before you actually finish the entire episode. Maybe it takes time to like, hey, hang on a second, let me pause this real quick. And hey, there's a weird sound coming from your microphone, Joe. Let's figure we can figure this thing out. I'm hearing it in my headphones as you talk. It sounds weird. Let's figure this out before we continue. I mean, if you can nip it in the bud early enough, that gives you time in the post-production, because sometimes there's some sounds that get recorded on a podcast that you can't get out of the recording, or they're just there. It's hard to get it out sometimes, and sometimes you just have to go with it, and that's just got to be the way it is. But if you're looking to make sure your audio sounds like totally perfect, which for the record, it never has to be exactly 100% perfect, like a sterile sound. I mean, your show is your show. I mean, you can do your show however you want to do it. If that's your thing, go right ahead. But I'm saying, I like to have my shows more natural and conversation-like. That's why when I do interviews and I do have conversations with other people on the podcast, I like to try to keep them very natural sounding, So just last night, as I record this episode, I had a chance to talk to Dave Jackson of the School of Podcasting Hall of Famer himself. I just asked him like the other day, I said, hey, are you available to call on my show? And he said, sure, no problem. And within short notice time, he came on my show last night. Well, literally, it was like 1 day notice. Such a great guy. And we had a wonderful conversation talking all about podcasting, a little bit about Libsyn, and about his School of Podcasting and what he does over there for you. If you're looking to start a podcast, grow your podcast, all about podcasting. The guy's been in the podcasting business for like 18 years, like since the very beginning of podcasting. So let's just say he knows a thing or two about podcasting. So here, please enjoy my conversation with the one, the only Dave Jackson.
Chris, I'm doing great, man. Glad to be here.
So how was your Mondays? Mondays recorded.
Mondays are always fun. I work for a podcast hosting company, and we don't have weekend support. So you kind of walk in on Monday, and it's a giant pile and things like that. Now, that's the kind of the bad news. The good news is Mondays go by super quick because you're just next ticket. So I'm doing great, and I'm glad to be here.
So as far as Libsyn, it's a podcast host, a media host that I host this show on there now. Now, Libsyn, with your tech support, what kind of ticket complaints do you usually get over there?
Why is my latest episode not an Apple? Because, and I'm trying to get them to change this, when you click publish in Libsyn, it says published. And what it should say is available. And I always use the analogy of the bus stop. When let's say you're sending your kid out to go to school and you walk him to the bus stop, you're like, okay, is he at school yet? And school would be Apple Podcasts. And you go, no, we've released him or her and she's standing at the bus stop, but no, she's not in school yet. And I'm like, that's kind of what happens when you're in your media host. When you say published, it's in your feed and it will be seen when the bus comes by and picks it up. And so that can be anywhere from 10 minutes to worst case scenario with Apple, 24 hours. And so I always just tell people, if you can, publish somewhat at the same time, whatever your schedule is. And the bus driver will then figure out, oh, Dave's always available at Monday at 12:05, and he'll stop by a little closer to that time than if I didn't. But I get that all the time. Hey, I just hit publish and it's been like, 7 minutes. Why isn't it at Apple? And you're like, okay. And I get that because most podcasters don't understand exactly how the mechanics of podcasting work. But that's a big one. Why is my episode there yet? I'm like, give it a couple hours.
Now, is Apple the longest, like as far as it to show up in a player? Does it take the longest of all of them?
Well, that's a great question. I know Spotify is one of the quickest, and it kind of varies because they all have bad days. I've seen Apple, I've seen Google, on occasion Amazon, but usually if you give it an hour or two, it's usually typically there because I think the companies have figured out that people are, they want the episode and they want it now. 5 hours would be, I think, really long, but I always also explain to people that one of the magic things of podcasting is it's not radio. Like you don't have to turn it on I know. You don't have to turn it on at 7:30 or you miss it. Like, if it comes out at 12:10 instead of 12:05, it's still there. It's not like you missed it.
I was like, yeah, you're right. I like the analogy. Like if you look at like the DVR versus live cable, because you used to like tape show. I remember when the DVR first came out, I was like, that's a game changer. I can like watch whatever I want when I want to watch it, not have to sit around at 8:00 to watch whatever show it is. And I think a lot of people do that, but
yeah, I used to watch football games on Sunday. I watch them still. I just never watch them live because I watch them on my computer and I can watch, what's normally a 3-hour football game in about 20 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
It's just watch the play, and the minute that's the guy's tackled, I just go fast forward, and you get kind of a weird little groove going on. You're like fast forward and stop.
I think the NFL Network does that on YouTube. At least they used to. They had like a condensed version of every game, like a replay game. I think it was like 15 minutes, maybe maybe half an hour or something like that. But exactly like you're saying, cut all the commercials, cut all the huddles out, just play.
That's it.
And that's it. Good to go. So other than that complaint, what's another big complaint you have over Libsyn for hosting?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably after that it's usually something like YouTube. And it's where is my stuff? Everybody wants it there. So if it's not on Apple, it's why isn't it on YouTube? And then how do I grow my audience? And that's
they ask you that at Libsyn, or they ask you?
And that's where you kind of go, that's not really a tech support question, but I will go in then. And this is the one that always makes me scratch my head. And this is really, it's not really a Libsyn thing. It's every media host has a way to make it easy for you to submit your show to different directories. So somebody will approach me and they'll say, hey, I'm trying to grow my audience. Do you have any tips? And I'll go in and I'll see where they've submitted their show to Spotify, and I'll look and I'll see they're in Apple. But I'll see where they're not in Amazon. And I'm like, I think most people have heard of Amazon, and they're not in iHeart, and they're not in, and I'm like, and it takes literally minutes, if not seconds, to submit your show to these. That's always a bit of a head scratcher that I'm like, why are you not submitting your show? And I know that some of them like Ghana and GeoSavin are two apps that are really, really popular in India. And I always want to go, you do know there are two things you should know about India. One, they speak English. And number two, there are a lot of people over there. And so I remember when Ghana launched, I was like, well, I'm going to put my show over there. I don't really care to, it's free. It took me all of 10 seconds. And I get a couple hundred downloads a month from Ghana.
Wow.
So like,
check that out.
So, and especially if I'm doing anything medical, yeah, I definitely want to make sure India is well aware of what's going on with my show.
Right. Hey, so speaking of Libsyn, I know because I'm on Libsyn now, I'm trying to figure things out, like from going from Anchor. I know you love Anchor so much. Making the jump from Anchor to Libsyn, trying to figure out the different things. Now, one thing I did notice is that you have IAB and /unique stats. What is the major difference? I know other than looking at the size of the number, what's the difference?
Yeah, the big one is IAB stats have a little more criteria. The unique values were based kind of on people used to say I'm IAB compliant. Well, it's kind of like saying I'm kind of pregnant. You're either IAB certified or you're not. And so one of the big ones is with IAB, you have to listen to a minute of content. And that's primarily on a website. because if I download your show, well, it looks like I listened to the whole thing because I downloaded the whole episode. So if you're on a platform, if your audience isn't super app, savvy, they might listen to a lot of your show on a website. And so if they click and listen to, 45 seconds and hit stop, that doesn't count as a download. So if you have a lot of people doing that, the unique value might actually count that as a download, and the IEB standard won't. So the IEB standard is typically always lower. And I always just say, for me, I don't want to say it doesn't matter. IEB is really important to people that are doing sponsors, because any kind of large sponsor is going to say, what's your IEB downloads? And they want how many downloads you got after 30 days.
Per episode, right?
Per episode, yeah. And that's the other one. People love to quote monthly stats.
Oh, and the totals too.
Yeah. And so that's where they really come into play. So if you're not doing advertising, you're just promoting your own product or service, then you kind of really don't care. I would say pick one and stay consistent with it. So for me, because when I started, we didn't have IAB stats, I still look at my unique numbers, and that it makes me feel good. My ego gets stroked. I'm like, oh, look at all the downloads.
It's like, I think for me, I noticed it was almost double, like per episode on episode to episode basis.
Yeah.
The IAB to the unique, it's double the difference about. Pretty close. Have you seen that too with yours?
Yeah, it depends on the show. I'd have to go in and log into mine, but I've seen some people where it's anywhere from 10 to 20%, maybe 30%. And then there are people like you where it's like 50%. So it kind of depends, I think, on your audience and where people listen and things like that.
So you did mention making money with your podcast. And obviously one thing that I have to tell these people that want to make money probably day one, you probably heard the same thing too, is I just started a podcast yesterday. I want to make some money now. What do you need? What do you need to get started?
Well, number one, you need an audience. And that's the part everybody forgets. I know. They're like, wait, are you crazy? Yeah. So you need an audience, and to get an audience, you need a good show. Now, there are places like you mentioned, Anchor, if you want to make, a penny a download, and there are other places that will pay you even less than that. And so I was looking where like the median number of downloads on Buzzsprout is 30 downloads per episode. Libsyn is about 150, and I'm sure the other ones. And when you take your 0.00, 2 cents and multiply that by 150, you're like, oh, I just made 77 cents. And I'm like, yeah, that's why that particular way is not going to feed your family. It's a way of income, so maybe you should or shouldn't ignore it. But that's the one that usually when you hear somebody say you'll make money from day one. I just saw a new service is coming out from the makers of Megaphone, which was bought by Spotify.
Correct, yeah.
And it's called Podroll. And they're saying we're solving discovery. And what they're going to do is you can somehow sign up. Now, I looked at the website for, 30 seconds. So if I get this somewhat wrong, I didn't dig in enough, but it sounds like you're going to somehow upload, I'm going to say maybe like a 30-second ad for your show. And they're going to put it after the post roll. So picture this. Here's the episode. Hey, thanks for tuning in. And then you got a 30-second post roll for whatever, Blue Apron or, BetterHelp, whatever. And then there's going to be your post roll talking about the show. And I go, I kind of want to go, this is another company that doesn't maybe know the industry they're in, because if you talk to anybody in advertising, it's not that nobody listens to the post roll ad, but the minute you start to say, hey, thanks so much for tuning in, there's a huge amount of your audience that is gone. They've gone on to the next episode.
Right. Yeah.
So when you say, yeah, I'm going to sell the post roll ad that comes after the post roll ad, I was like, okay, I'm open-minded. I don't want to poo-poo anything, but I was just like, I don't know that that's going to be I also am weird because I don't think there's a discovery problem. I understand that discovery means it's some sort of robot that.
They're thinking like an automatic algorithm that just like puts it to the front of the top.
Yeah, and they said because Apple kind of has this at the bottom of Apple Podcasts when you're listening to a show to be like other people like this show. So I'm like, okay, so it's something that is watching what you consume, and then it knows what you like, and it then recommends things that are like that. And I go, oh, I have that. It's called Friends.
Oh, yeah.
And they go, oh, you like this TV show? Oh, you should check this out. You like Ozark? Oh, you should watch the Breaking Bad or whatever. And it's like, so when they say it's a discovery problem, I'm like, yeah, I do have a discovery system. It's called my friends and family.
But how does a new show, like maybe 5 months into doing their podcast, like how would they like help get the word out? They have a show. Like what would the best way to do it?
Well, in that syndrome, what I've always told people from really day one of the School of Podcasting, because that particular feature was in iTunes back in the day. And I would say, number one, as you're starting out, go listen to other shows like yours to find out what you like and what you dislike. You might get inspired, like, oh, I like that idea, but I'm going to do it this way. And I said, so while you're there, subscribe to all the shows that are like yours, because then when your show comes out, your show will be at the bottom of theirs that say, hey, if you like this show, here's another show like it. So that's one little strategy.
No way. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So subscribe to other shows like yours, and that will, in theory, put you at the bottom of that page. So that's an easy free one that you're kind of relying on, a robot to recommend you. But and then I just had Gary Arndt on. He does a show called Everything Everywhere, and Gary kind of broke the mold. I've been talking about breaking podcasting best practices, and he does a daily show. He writes a 2,000-word essay about something that's interesting. It's really great kind of dinner party talk. Like, did you know that Mount Fumanjangi, blah, 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 that kind of trivia stuff.
Like daily trivia, daily facts of the day, like stuff like that.
And what he does is he promotes his shows on a lot of apps. You can spend, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And I call that the movie industry strategy. Because if you think about it, the movie, they have a writer, they get the best actors, there's an editor. And at the end, if they're smart, they've done some sort of screening to get feedback from people before they launch it out into the world. And when they do, they spend a boatload of money on promotion so that people know it's there. And then people go and consume it. And if they like it, they tell their friends. And that's kind of what Gary is doing.
But he's paying to put his show, like ads for his show in other places.
Right.
What does it cost to do that? Say, I mean, for a minimum, for like a basic cost.
Yeah. I think the most affordable one right now is from Buzzsprout. They have a thing called Buzzsprout ads, and you can spend $100 for 5,000 impressions. And this is where it's kind of interesting, because some people think they'll run it and it doesn't work. Like when I first heard about this, I scrambled to throw together an ad, and then I put it there and I set up a landing page and things like that. Well, there are many things in that equation. Number one, is your ad good? And when I went back and listened to mine, it was horrible. It was all about Dave Jackson. Dave Jackson does this, and Dave Jackson does this, and you should listen to Dave Jackson. And I was like, yeah, it wasn't about, hey, I understand who you are and what your problems are, and here's how I solve them. I should have made it all about them and not about me. So that was dumb.
Well, are the other ones doing the same thing? Are they kind of similar? Like, look at me, we do this and we do that.
Yeah, it's. I'd have to go. I haven't heard that many shows. I know. I listened to, now they just changed the name. It's Pod News Weekly Review. They have a few ads in it that I think are using this system, because to sell ads, you have to be on Buzzsprout. But I can basically put my show on another show. And that's the other thing they changed. Originally, I didn't get any say on who got to play my ad. So there were some that was like, yeah, and they've changed that, because that was a bad idea.
Yeah, you can put your show against a true crime show or something like that.
Yeah. It's like, I don't really want, the knitting show shouldn't be on the, headbangers.
So would you say it's absolutely necessary today to do something like that, to get your show out there? You have to do that?
Have to? No. But if you want to do it fast, it's definitely, the idea is go to where your audience is. Well, we want people that listen to podcasts. So an easy answer to that is other apps and things of that nature. But the thing that everybody skips is that thing where, Ron Howard won Academy Awards and Emmys. And he's been, he was a little Opie on the Andy Griffith Show back in the day. And he was on Happy Days. So this is a guy that knows how to make a good movie. And he does not release any movie without sitting in an audience and watching them watch a movie. He's like, because I know when they're supposed to laugh, I know when they're supposed to cry and whatever. And he goes, and if there's a spot that's supposed to get a laugh and it doesn't get a laugh, he goes, we go back and do some editing. And I think a lot of people skip that. They're just happy to get an MP3 out. They're like, oh my God, that took 14 hours. And they're going to throw it out there. And I'm like, you might want to, and they make the mistake. I've had people that have told me, they're like, they'll give me something. I'm like, okay, well, this could be a little better, and this is really good, and this is good, but this thing at the end is really confusing. They're like, oh my God, thank you so much. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, our family told it was brilliant. And I go, well, mom is never going to give you
that is
an
true.
honest answer, and friends and family. So you need somebody who's going to be a truth teller.
I'd say the same thing too. Get it reviewed by somebody that's not your family or friends, if you can. And make it, if you can, find someone that it's your target audience. If you could, but it's just not always easy, because I've had people pitch me for shows. Hey, check out my show, and it's like a show that I would never listen to. Yeah, I mean, even without them telling me to listen to it, I still would listen to it. I'll listen to it to see what it sounds like. Oh, it sounds great. It's not really for me, but I'm not really into like D&D or Superman or whatever comic book stuff. That's not really my thing. But I mean, good on you for doing it. And it sounds great, But I try to help people out. Anybody comes to me for advice, I always try to give them the best advice I possibly can. I know you do the same thing, and I know you have a few different review shows that you do give review for the other shows. I know that the Podcast Rodeo show, you can be a little bit brutal on some of those reviews, shows that come in.
It was funny because my background's in teaching, so I never really want to be like the guy that makes you quit because I gave you some honest feedback. So I've tried to be a little more kindler, gentler. It's like, hey, here's what I really liked about it. Here's what I liked about this. And here's the part that really annoyed me. So I try to give them not just like, hey, your audio quality sounds like you're frying bacon underwater, kind of thing. It's like, and here's how you fix that, get your mic closer to your mouth and things like that. But yeah, I had one person that asked me to review, and what she was talking about was super personal and super sensitive. I mean, she's just explaining how she had this horrible childhood. And I said, okay, I don't understand why you're telling me this stuff, though. I go, what does this have to do with the podcast? And she got really hurt and offended.
Yeah.
And was like, and I was like, whoa. So I kind of reached out to my audience and I said, hey, like, what do you guys think? And they're like, we were thinking the same thing. Like, you just said what we were thinking. And they said, we didn't think you were rude. You just said, why are you telling me this? I even apologized. I said, I'm sorry to hear you had such a horrible, childhood. I said, but what does this have to do? I think it was about a business show or something like that.
Oh, they actually had a theme to the show. It wasn't just her rambling about nothing, about something.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing, is she was talking about this horrible childhood, but that's not what the episode was supposed to be about. And she kept saying in the show, this will make sense later.
Oh, did it?
And no, and it didn't. And I said, so, and she's like, oh, well, in a couple episodes, I will get, so she had this whole like story arc. Like I had to listen to 5 episodes, and I go, nobody's going to make it to episode 5 if you lose them in episode 1. And again, that's just like, I'm here to tell you, I don't understand what's going on. I'm confused. The title of the episode says this, and you're talking about this. So this is what this is. It's a first impression. I'm like, I'm listening to this going, I don't know what I'm listening to. And I said, and there's just way too much competition to waste my time on 20 minutes of something that I'm not getting something out of it. So
that's true. There's a lot of competition out there. So I think people have to really make a good podcast right out the gate. So what would you say, Dave Jackson, in your opinion, what makes the difference between a good podcast versus a bad podcast, in your opinion?
Editing. Hands down, editing. And that doesn't mean you have to take out every and every breath and things like that. But I hear so many shows where, especially if you're doing a video show, I heard a show today and they were doing it live on YouTube and you're listening to the audio, which is fine, until they said, oh man, look at that. Ooh, oh man, look, oh geez. And I'm like, and it went on for about 3 minutes of them going, oh, well, that's different. Ooh, I like the purple. I have no idea what they're, So right, that's that. Or when somebody comes up and you take a tangent, nothing wrong with a tangent if it ties in, but when you're like, hold on, it was here a minute ago, and you just, doggone it, I know it was here. And I'm like, that's fine. That's going to happen. Just edit it out.
Right. Yeah,
I just did one. I had an interview on my last show, and a lot of it was because this was a guy that's been around for a while. So we're just swapping stories. And a lot of times my story would kind of re-emphasize whatever his story was about. So if he was like, yeah, that was really hard, I'm like, oh, I know. And the one time, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, well, the audience got it the first time. They don't really need my story. They understand the first part. So I was just cutting me out left and right. So I think editing, being a little prepared, that's that. And I always say the ingredients you're looking for, and how I got to this was for 2 weeks, I think it was 2 weeks, I sat down and wrote down everything I either listened to, watched, or read. And then I would say, why did you listen, watch, or read that? And it came down, it either made me laugh, cry, think, groan, educate, or entertain. And if you can do more than one of those. So like I love Last Week Tonight with John Oliver on HBO. And it's kind of a political show. So I'm being educated. He's making me laugh because he's a comedian, and so those two things together, like, okay, I'm laughing as I'm learning, and he's entertaining. He's just silly at times. So anytime you can do more than one of those, it's a home run. So it's and I just hear people sometimes and they go, well, what if I'm not making you laugh, cry, think, groan, educate, or entertain? I go, oh, there's a word for that. It's called boring.
Yeah.
And it is. And I remember once I was listening to, it was Mark Maron and Tom Segura, so it's two famous comedians. And to them, it was interesting because they were talking about, I remember the Chuckle Hut in Poughkeepsie, and oh man, remember in the basement. And they were having a great time going down memory lane. And I remember about 9 minutes in, I was like, okay, I'm not laughing. I'm not thinking. I'm officially bored with this conversation. I'm like, why am I listening to this? And I was like, oh, they're celebrities. This is supposed to be entertaining. Right, and I just was like, yeah, we're done. Okay. You guys got a 9 minute pass, but we're done. I'm on to something that's gonna, entertain me.
I know that a lot of shows, you've probably seen this too, they do the interview style show. It's a very popular thing. I think it really peaked up really a lot during the whole COVID because a lot of people are home, they have nothing else to really do. And especially if your guest is also home, nothing to do. So you can interview anytime you want. And It's all good. And Zoom's been around for a while, but I think Zoom really hit the mainstream, I think, during COVID. In fact, we actually used Zoom before COVID and we tried it. So it's kind of cool. It's fun and all, but now all of a sudden everyone's using Zoom. But I know the whole interview thing is popular. So when it comes to a guest, some people will try to get those big names and thinking that will be the magic bullet for my show to catapult me into stardom. Do you ever see that too?
Oh yeah. Everybody's like, if I could just get so-and-so on my show. Or what happens is they get so-and-so, big person, big name, well-known, blah, blah, blah. And then they ask them the exact same questions that everybody else has done. And then they wonder why the person didn't share it. Well, put yourself in the shoes of that big person that's answered question A, B, C, and D 4,000 times. Because every time they get on, tell me about the time when you did this. Well, is he going to share that with their audience? No, they're not, because he's already done that probably 2,000 times. He was like, I'll be nice and promote it. So if you want somebody to promote it, you have to do two things. One, ask questions, give them a different interview so it's not the same old thing. If it's an author, read the book. I cannot tell you.
Wait, not just the cover and the back page? Or
right, and not the synopsis or whatever that one thing is.
Yes.
And then when the thing goes live, you can say, hey, here's the graphic. There's a website called Click and the number 2 tweet that you can actually pre-write a tweet. And when they click on that, if they're logged into Twitter, it'll automatically go to Twitter, type up the tweet. All they have to do is click on send. So anything you can do to make it easy.
Right.
If it is a big name, you can kind of do this little thing where you're like, hey, thanks so much again for the interview. When this goes live, it's just something I give all the media stuff to Susan. Is Susan the person I need to send this? So you're kind of already like, hey, you're going to promote this later, right? Who do I talk to get this going? And sometimes that'll kind of
right. And sometimes they don't promote it because they're just too big shot. They don't care. They're like, okay, whatever, on to the next. So you can send them an email or even your link or whatever, and they just like brush it off. Sometimes they'll promote it, and sometimes you will see a spike in numbers, but then I think your numbers kind of fall back down to more normal, really, after that. So people kind of see that like, yes, I'm going to be having 1 million downloads. This is great. And then they fall back down to reality, and then it's back to the grind all over again. Yeah,
we just had a problem with the Samsung app where Samsung was featuring people, and they would automatically download 10 of their episodes onto your phone. So all of a sudden, people that were normally getting 170 downloads an episode were getting 1,700, and they're like, "Wait, what's going on?" Oh yeah, it was nuts. And what those people found is you're like, great, I'm going to have, 17,000 people now listening to my show. And they're like, nope. And it might go, maybe they got if they were at 150, maybe they're up to, 200, which I'll take 50 listeners, but.
Of course, yeah.
But on the other hand, apparently a large number of those people were not your target audience, or B, maybe your show needs a little work.
Yeah, definitely. So, Dave, I'm going to switch gears here and talk a little bit about video. I know it's been a big thing right now. Everyone's talking about video. Do you need video? Is it required? It must have. What's your thoughts on podcast for video?
Yeah, if you're not doing it and you're having a hard time staying consistent with audio, absolutely not. You don't need it. Let's do that. Because I've been doing it for years without video. I kind of have a YouTube channel, but I'm not very consistent with that. And I'm not going to say the person's name, but just trust me, if I said the person's name, you go, oh, I know who he is. That person has a show. And I'm like, yep. And they're on Libsyn, and they came to us and they wanted to host a video file. And they're like, yep, we can do that. And so we said, but don't you want to take the audio out of this? Because it's just talking heads. Why don't you put this out as an audio podcast? And they're like, nah, we're just doing video. And we're like, are you sure? You should probably do audio. Long story short, they promoted the heck out of their video version. We talked them into an audio version, but they really, 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 everything was promoting their video version, and the audio was outperforming it 20-1.
20-1. I think I heard that too. It's like,
yeah. Rob was talking about it on the feed. Rob Walsh.
Yeah, that's why I heard about it. Yeah. So that's crazy. I mean, people always want to push this whole YouTube video thing. That's the whole thing, especially like the Talking Head show. You know?
Yeah, and it does kind of help, because what you end up getting, at least in my travels, is I have found that there is kind of two camps. There are people that love podcasting and they worship the ground of true crime or whatever. They just live and breathe podcasting. And then you have people that it's YouTube all day, all night, on the TV, on the phone, everything's YouTube. And they don't really cross mingle. And I've had people that have joined the school of podcasting that found things on my YouTube channel, and they're like, oh, you do audio stuff too?
No way. Check that out.
I was like, for 17 years, I've been doing a little audio. So it is two different audiences. And that's kind of the thing where I think a lot of people think, I'll start a YouTube channel and it will grow my audio channel. And it's like, nope, you'll probably get more people that like your stuff on YouTube, but getting the two to kind of cross-pollinate, they'll like, oh, put more stuff on YouTube because that's where I live. And they're like, all right, I get it. So,
well, people can put I know Libsyn has this feature where you can upload your audio show to YouTube, and it's just a static image, but it's there. At least it's on the platform,
Yeah, it's better than nothing. It's free. And I always say, if you're not doing anything in YouTube, you can definitely do that. Now, I actually have a YouTube channel. So what I did was I set up a separate channel just for that stock image audio version of the podcast, because YouTube is the second biggest search engine. And I'm like, hey, I'll put it out there. Again, it doesn't cost me anything. It's free. Why wouldn't I? And then I keep all the actual video stuff on my other channel.
So I do hear that with a video podcast, you can, in theory, you can talk right into your camera and do the entire show right here. And then you can do, like you said, audio for the podcast, audio stuff, and the whole video setup for the video for the YouTube. Does that help at all? Do you see that working for anybody?
I've seen some people. It's on one hand, if I can do it in one place and then convert it to multiple formats, why wouldn't you do that? It's a great use of your time,
right?
Of your time, because I only do it once and then the rest is all in editing. So, and I've seen, Eric Hunley does a show. Oh, it's going to drive me nuts. But it's one word, whatever it is. But Eric does this show, and he did it on audio for years and got a little traction, but nothing really crazy. And he switched to YouTube, and for whatever reason, that audience just went crazy on it. So Unstructured, I think, is the name of his show. And
but he was on camera though when he did it, or just a stock image?
I think. Oh, the stock image. I don't know anybody that's taken off. I think everybody else is like, I get 20 downloads of their views of that or whatever. I don't know anybody that's really taken off. But no, he switched from. I think he still does the audio, but he's a guy that now does his show as a YouTube channel. So he kind of switched. He used to do audio and put it out as a static image. And now he's like, hey, I'm doing the video thing, and I'll take the audio from that and put it out as a podcast.
Yeah. Well, I think video, YouTube relies on actual video, like showing me something, Yeah. And the thing I noticed about YouTube is that I don't know if it's something to do different with podcasting or different podcast players, but with YouTube for sure, is that when you're watching YouTube, YouTube gives you choices to the side column of other things very similar to what you're watching and things you like. So YouTube's very good at keeping you on the platform. And I don't think I've ever really finished a video on YouTube. I've always gone to the next thing because, oh, that looks kind of cool. Let me click on that. And then you watch that for a while. I'm bored. And you go to the next thing. But in a podcast player, it doesn't really happen like that, does it? Because you're not looking at it, right?
No, it's usually, that's number one. I hit play and it goes back in my pocket. And so I use in the past, I've used Overcast. I recently switched to Cast-O-Matic, and I make what are called smart playlists. So I listen to just about every podcast about podcasting. And then I have a playlist that's called, you guessed it, podcasting. And so I've just said, hey, when so-and-so has a new episode, put it in this playlist. So I will just hit play, and then as I'm walking, I might hear, the new media show, and then it's the grow the show, and then it's your show, or, it just goes to next, to next, to next. So that's, but that's because I searched for those shows, or I knew about them, or they came up on my radar, or things like that. And that's what's always kind of fun, because that particular podcast about podcasting is a genre that has a lot of people jump into that pool, and a lot of people that are like, oh, this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be.
Well, I just make it look easy, man. That's how I do it around here. I'm running 2 shows and a full-time job, and it's, but I have fun doing it. That's the thing I always say is I always put the fun as the forefront of podcasting. No matter what you're doing, have fun. If you're not having fun, then it becomes another job. And I mean, who loves their job? That's why I look at it too. And I know that you start making money using your podcast as a revenue tool, then you start thinking about how much money can I make, and the different charging this and charging that and all that stuff. Hey, speaking of ads, I was going to ask you is that I think every podcast player has got a skip button on it, right? Yep. Versus like audio, versus radio, because radio you can't skip, because radio, the commercial comes on, you're stuck hearing it unless you change channels, and then there's another commercial on that channel. So what do? But I think like I just always kind of thought of why the ads? Because I can just hit a skip button on my truck or in my phone. I mean, with YouTube, you have to wait until it gives you the permission to skip an ad. Do you see people I mean, I just don't get the whole ads with a podcast. You know what I'm saying?
Well, there's a friend of mine, Neil Headley. He does a podcast called The Voice Inside My Head, and head is spelled H-E-D because his last name is H-E-D-L-E-Y. And he's got probably 20, 30 years in radio, and more importantly, advertising in radio. And he said a lot of people are just putting in advertising because they're like, hey, here's, something from some company that kind of relates, but not really, until I come back and give you more stuff, is really what we're kind of saying. And he's like, people need to remember that advertising used to be content. We used to talk about commercials. The plop, plop, fizz, fizz, and where's the beef, and all these other, the other day, a commercial came on about Santa, and I thought it was the old, and I'm really dating myself, this is like early 70s, but there was a Norelco commercial where Santa was driving around this little Norelco razor. I was like, oh my God, I think that's, then I was like, nope, but I remember that commercial. And so in podcasting, it just seems like advertisements are just, here's some bullet points about something, you use my promo code. And they're not very entertaining. So I'm trying to do a little more of that. But in terms of skipping, if you go into Apple Podcasts, they have a place, if you go into podcasts with an S, podcast.connect, nope, I said that wrong, podcastconnect.apple.com. In there, you can go in and look at your episodes and see how far people listened, which everybody goes, oh man, that'd be great. And then you go, wait, they're only listening at 48%? You're like, yep.
Oh yeah.
And I can see exactly where my ads are, because all of a sudden there's this little just droop, and you can tell that's where people went, all right, hold on, click, and then there are certain apps that I can say on a per show basis, like I know Conan O'Brien, I start the show about 7.5 minutes because he just talks to his assistant and blah, blah, blah. And it's an interview show. I want to get to the guest, and he's just, dropping better ad or better health or whatever commercials. I'm like, start that at the 7.5 minute mark. So, they work for really big shows. If you have a niche show, then you can charge more. So they kind of work for that. But I only know a few people that are making a living with advertisements only, and that's because they get 6-figure downloads. And then they'll put 6 ads in a hour-long show. And they're really good ads. They're entertaining, they're informative, they're personalized. So
and they're host read, right? Host read ads,
and they're host read. Yeah, when you get into programmatic, I can say this because growing up, I was on welfare, but I consider programmatic ads somewhat like podcast welfare because in some cases you're making, when I did my research for my book, the one I was making 0.0007 cents. So it wasn't even like, it was 1/7 of a tenth of a percent. It was ridiculous. And I was, so if you're getting your typical 150, 300 downloads, you're like, wait, I think I made enough for a half a cup of coffee. And then again, they don't really,
right? Yeah,
they don't match the audience and things like that. But that's the kind of like, hey, you can make money from day one. And I'm like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we've kind of like, I kind of not a big fan of ads. And I just like, I don't need them for my show. Even if they're going to pay me a few cents or even a few dollars, I'm like, yeah, I'd rather use my podcast in other ways. And I enjoy listening to the show. And if I turn a show on, the first thing is like this ad, and then it's maybe some content, and then it's a horrible sounding show, I'm already checked out. I'm just mad. I just get angry when I hear an ad. The first thing that hits me in the face, it's like feeling like get punched in the face with an ad. What is that all about?
Yeah, it's not a great first impression, and I know there are systems that'll automatically put on a pre-roll and a post-roll, which is great. And if I've ever used that, that's where it's like a 10-second, hey, today's show is brought to you by so-and-so. I'll be talking about it later. Here's the show. Boom. Like, I don't want to really, if you think about it, I remember when Walmart was new, which however many years ago that was. Yeah, I do. I remember that.
Didn't our founding fathers like planted the Walmart flag as they came off the Mayflower?
But do you remember walking into Walmart and there'd be some person standing there and they go, hey, welcome to Walmart. And you're like, well, that's so friendly. They're welcoming, but can you imagine if that person said, hey, welcome to Walmart. Can you just hang here for a second? And you're like, wait, what? And you're like, no, just hold on. Okay, now you can go get your stuff. It's like, so that's kind of what a pre-roll ad is to me. I'm like, hey, I know you came here to buy bread and eggs, but can you hold on, 15, 20 seconds? So anytime I ever have any kind of pre-roll situation, I try to make it as short as possible. And if possible, let it be my voice and not, the Geico gecko. And,
right. Yeah. So what in your experiences, what is the best way to launch a show episode? Like, what would you start? Because we've done is like a short little clip of the show, like 10 seconds, something kind of like, huh? He said what? And then kind of like roll into it. Or you can just start off with just your usual intro or whatever. What do you think?
There are a couple. The thing that makes me cringe on the 10-second clip from the conversation is that it took you 50 minutes to find the 10-second clip. You're going back and you're listening, like it's in here somewhere. And so for me, unless you got lots of free time, that's not enough ROI. And many times the clip, you have to remember that clips, the goal is to make people want to hear more. Like you said, they're like, wait, what? You need some sort of reaction so that they stay listening. Where I'm like, wouldn't it just be easier to go, hey, today on the show, we're talking with Joni Smith, and she's making a living using free software. Okay. I'm in. I'll listen to that. So to me, there's that. Or you can do the cold open if you have some sort of story or something like that. And you're like, well, I remember back in 2010, and then you start a story. I was standing on my grandma's porch and blah, 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 and try to keep it, you don't want to go into a giant ramble. And then you're like, and that's when I learned about that. And I'm going to tell you how that ties into blah, blah, blah today. Hit it, and then off you go. So I've seen people do that. I always just say, for me, the intro, I do a show called the Podcast Review Show, and my buddy Eric K. Johnson says nobody gets on a bus without knowing where it's going. And so for me, the show should say, welcome to the blah, blah show, where we blah, blah, blah. So that lets me know what the show's about. On today's show, we're talking with so-and-so about such and such and how you can, in other words, here's the benefit, here's why you want to listen, and off you go. And now the person can go, oh, okay, I'm in the right place because I was looking for a show about blank and this thing where they're going to talk about such and such. And that's something I'm starting to notice more and more is not many people put a so you can. So it's like, hey, we talk to interesting people with interesting stories. Okay, so you can, Jordan Harbinger is one of those guys that's making, 6-figure downloads, and he will talk to astronauts and mafia bosses and actors, but it's all under the umbrella of critical thinking. And his whole thing is like, it's something about the matrix. So you can decipher between the red pill and the green pill when you're going through the matrix or something of that nature. But it's all these great stories, great guests, but it's all about how to think about things and kind of be able to spot the BS and things like that. So That's his so you can be a better critical thinker.
And Dave, you have the School of Podcasting to help people figure this stuff out. So, what is your onboarding process like for the School of Podcasting?
Yeah, you sign up, and I actually send you a personalized video, and people always go, "How did you do that? Like, what AI?" I'm like, "No, that's me in front of a camera saying, 'Welcome to the School of Podcasting.'" And so, yeah, you sign up, you get instant access, and you'll get an email from me explaining, "Here's what you're going to do." And because when you sign up, you get access to all the courses. It explains the community. I use an app that I do for one-on-one consulting. So I answer a lot of questions via text and video and audio on our phones because you might be in, some other country on a different time zone. So we do a lot of time shifted coaching that way. I also do live coaching, but I always kind of feel bad because when you sign up, you get this email about here's how to install the app. And then the next one's like, oh, we also have a private podcast feed. Here's how you sign up for that. So there are like 2 or 3 things you're going to sign up for. And I always kind of feel bad because I'm picturing the first person that's like, I don't know about technology. And you're like, here you go, have a bunch of tech. But that's why I send this personalized video along with a link like, hey, let's sit down for like 15, 20 minutes and figure out where you are so that you're not taking a bunch of courses that you don't need. And so I switched that in the middle of this year. I still obviously am always trying to get new members, but I said I want to double down on the people who actually click the button to buy. And so I used to focus on promoting my one-on-one consulting, which I still do, but I now said, wait, let's just shower the people that are here and make sure they're moving and going forward and things like that. So that's kind of it. And then it's just, there's a great community. There's a ton of, brilliant podcasting minds. We do have a Facebook group that's in addition to our community. So I had somebody today, they're like, which artwork do you like better, this one or that one? And I go, let's throw that into the community. That's a community thing. So it's a lot of fun. And we do group coaching. Every Friday I do lunch with Dave where it's just a half hour to come in and ask me anything. And then we do one on the weekend. We do one on a Wednesday night. Same thing. Just ask me anything. And,
wow. You're like super busy with the school podcasting thing. It's like a full-time job.
It pretty much is. And that's, people always say, well, Dave, how do you work at Libsyn and run the School of Podcasting? And I go, Dave is single with no kids.
And you work from home.
I work from home. Yeah. So it's a lot of fun.
How long does people stay on the School of Podcasting course? Is it a course or how long does it go?
Yeah, it's multiple courses. It really depends on what you're doing. Like I have a whole course on how to monetize your show. I have one on how to build a website. Well, if you've already got a website and you don't want to monetize, then you don't have to take those courses. And I started doing that. I now have a free course on how to choose a media host because people would watch a whole course on Blueberry, they'd watch a whole course on Buzzsprout, and they'd watch a whole course on Libsyn and then go, okay, I'm going to go with Libsyn. Well, then I just wasted your time with the Blueberry and the Buzzsprout thing. So I now have this little mini course that's like, hey, here's like a 3-minute overview of Buzzsprout. Here's a 3-minute overview of Captivate. Which one of these kind of rubbed you the right way? Go spend the time watching that course. So that's something else I just added. So
what kind of clients, what type of shows come to you?
It varies from the 32-year-old entrepreneur who wants to launch a coaching business and they've got some experience from working in the real world, for lack of a better phrase, and now they want to transfer that to a coaching business. So I've got that kind of younger person. The thing that surprised me, I have a fair number of empty nesters that are boomers. And so these are people that have a ton of experience. Their kids are off to college or married or whatever's going on, and they have something to say and they're seeing things. And they're also in some cases thinking of, hey, I kind of want to have a side hustle because I'm probably going to retire in a few years, but I don't want to completely retire. So I'm going to build the well before I'm thirsty. And so they start a podcast. Yeah. And so that was the one that surprised me. I have one member named Zeta Christian, and she's in her 70s. I think I'm allowed to say that. And I love her to death because so many people are like, ooh, technology scares me. And she's just like, no, it's just going to take me a second to get it, and she's awesome. And she does a number of shows, but her latest show is called My Spouse Has Dementia. And that was really eye-opening because, when you hear dementia, it's like, oh, funny jokes about, oh, I lost my keys. Oh, I'm losing, my memory or whatever. And it's a horrible disease. And it's one of those things when people listen to that show, especially other people that are the caregivers for your spouse, they're like, yes, I thought I was the only one going through this, torture. And so she's grown a great community over there. But, if somebody looked, you're like, wait, you have a 70-year-old-ish, podcaster. I'm like, yep. And I have somebody that's probably 32. So
is 32 the youngest you had come across your thing?
That's a great question. No, I had a kid that was 19 for a while that was doing it. And it's really, and that's the beauty of it, is like that kid can come in with like handfuls, like bushels of TikTok tips that I don't have. And then you'll have somebody else that's was a graphic artist person that knows Photoshop, but they also know tons of stuff about Canva. And that's where the community is really almost half the product, because it's the other people. They're like, hey, like I just found out about something on AppSumo. It was something like remaster something. And somebody had already bought it. And they're like, yeah, if you're using Alphonic, stick with that. This is cool. Here's an example of it. So we're all kind of learning together over there too. So that's another reason why I really, really love it. It was a great side effect.
Have you ever had any of those, I guess the two guys, one brain, with one mic drinking shows come across School Podcasting?
I have one now that's pretty, but they're having a blast. And their whole thing is, look, we know it's just us having fun and we want to talk about our subject and it's great. But they now know from being there that, okay, if we really do want to monetize this, we got to kind of tighten it up a bit and, that whole 9 yards. So yeah, I've had a few. I've also had a lot of people that have gone through, okay, I know who my audience is. I know how I'm going to do things different. I got my equipment. I've recorded stuff. And now it's time to publish something. And I've seen a lot of people just disappear. They're still members of the School of Podcasting, and I'm still sending them videos going, what happened? I'm here to help. What's the last thing I have is you were getting ready to record episode 1 and they just ghost me. It's really bizarre. But it's that fear, it's imposter syndrome is what a lot of people think. They're like, oh, well, nobody's going to listen to me, or I'm going to look stupid. And I would just say, I'm not going to let you look stupid. But it's interesting. Not a ton of people, but I've had people that have been really excited. I mean, they're like, I can't wait. This is going to be so much fun. And all right, first hurdle, second hurdle, third hurdle. All right, let's get that first episode out. And all of a sudden, poof, they just disappear. So
now that just seems weird, like, I mean, I don't know, maybe because for audio for me feels so comfortable. Like I can talk,
right.
No one can see me. It's great. But when you get into like maybe video, I think that's where it gets a little scary because when I'm on video, I'm like all self-conscious looking in the camera and the lighting and making sure the background looks great and what's behind me in the shot and whatever, what am I wearing, all that stuff. But when it's audio, I think it strips all that away. You don't have to worry about it so much. That's why I love podcasting.
It's weird. I know when I was married, my ex-wife and I did a show, and she was always worried about what she was going to say. And I go, nobody knows it's you. Like, they know it's some woman named such and such. And I go, and she's like, yeah, but if somebody hears it, I go, let me show you my stats. They're like, no, there are 4 billion people in this world. We've got, 128 people listening to that episode. I go, it's not something to worry about, but it's something that really bugged her. They're all worried. We always think about the audience, but it's the audience. I go, the audience is going to come in about 3 years. I go, in the meantime, just keep working on your craft. So it's always kind of fun that way.
I would say have fun. Like I've always had fun with this show and the other show. I have a blast. And like last night we had a show. We had 3 people in this room and we had so much fun recording. And it was so fun talking about what not to buy your husband for Christmas this year. And it's just so fun. Like, oh, I've gotten those gifts now I think about it. So like clothing was a gift idea on there not to get your husband. Like I always like it when my wife buys me gifts because I'm like horrible with the design. Most guys are, they can't figure out what to buy themselves, So it's just a fun time. And I love having fun with a podcast. And this has been so much fun having you, Dave, on this show today, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Chris, thanks for having me, man. It was a blast.
So, Dave, everybody can find you at, what is it? The schoolofpodcasting.com, right?
Yep. That's the place to go. And you've got everything there. You can subscribe. You can join the newsletter. You can, sign up and get access to the courses and all the coaching and all that other fun stuff. It's all there at schoolofpodcasting.com.